Hello, everyone. I'm here tonight to talk to you about signs of stress and what to do with them. To calm down, slow down, reassure, and connect. My name is Elizabeth Dondinell. I'm a licensed marriage family therapist, a founder of a group practice, East Bay Center for Anxiety Relief, here in Alameda, California. Before we begin, or I talk further, I would like to define stress for you and what I mean when I'm talking about stress throughout this webinar. And so how I'm defining stress here is the physical or emotional and mental tension that you experience when you care about something. You know, in our day-to-day lives, with our families and our children and our jobs and things we want to accomplish and things that we value and feel are important, when we invest time with them or connect with them, we'll feel there is a certain level of tension, which is known as stress, because we care about them. Now, there's healthy stress and unhealthy stress. And I use a 1 to 10 rating scale, and anything between about a 2 to a 5 on that rating scale, I would say is healthy stress, is normal. It ebbs and flows throughout our day. And we have other feelings and emotions in addition to feeling a little stressed. What happens when it hits a 5 or higher is that our stress then becomes lingering or consistent or reoccurring and creates a higher degree or a high degree of emotional upsetness that creates obstacles in our day-to-day functioning. And so that is the stress that I'm speaking here to you today about, and the stress that has accumulated over the last year due to many of the situations we've been in, such as the pandemic, that reach a level 5 or higher, and that they linger or they're consistent or they're reoccurring. This is the big, one of the key factors here. It doesn't just ebb and flow, it lingers, it's consistent, or it reoccurs. I'm going to take a couple of minutes to go through the physical and emotional signs of stress and then move forward on what do you do about this. So the physical signs of stress, one of them is low energy. Now, I'm not speaking about the typical low energy that you might go through when you're just kind of tired or you're dragging a bit. This is a low energy, an experience that you have with things that you normally don't have low energy for, or normally doesn't feel overwhelming or draggy. And now you're finding yourself having difficulty engaging in the activities, difficulty focusing, and maybe even difficulty getting up in the morning and doing the things that you normally do. It kind of has a weight and a heaviness to it, or sometimes can stimulate a feeling of dread. That is the type of low energy I'm talking about that is related to stress. Then there's chest pains. Now, chest pains, of course, when we think about them, we immediately think of our hearts. And of course, yes, a heart attack or something that is going wrong with our hearts definitely brings on chest pains. But stress can bring on the physical symptom of a chest pain, simply because when we are breathing and we're stressed for a long period of time, that we will tend to breathe in the more shallow part of our lungs, and we're not literally not dropping down and breathing into the bottom 1/3 of our lungs. And that expansion of a deep breath just loosens up the muscles a little bit, keeps them expanded. And when we're stressed, we tend to kind of hunker in, maybe lean forward these days with all the Zoom work that we do, or the computer work. We may have a tendency to lean forward, and this all causes contractions in the muscles. And that can cause chest pains when you try and sit up straight or kind of stretch yourself out when you're stressed. Headaches are also common. Now, I'm not talking about somebody who maybe gets migraines regularly or even tension headaches regularly. This is a physical sign of stress that is uncommon to you. So if you're not one to be prone to headaches and you find yourself getting headaches and feeling like the tension in your neck, that can be a physical sign of stress. Teeth grinding. Teeth grinding often happens in the middle of the night or when we're sleeping. And if you wake up with a sore jaw or a real tightness or tension in your jaw, that is a sign that you might be grinding your teeth. The other time teeth grinding typically happens when it's a physical manifestation of stress is when you're very focused on something and you're dealing with something that kind of stresses you out. You may find you're clenching your jaw or grinding your teeth some. Upset stomach is probably the most common related to physical signs of stress. And the reason for that is that when stress is happening, our body goes into red alert, which means the body and the mind are sending signals to each other, basically saying red alert, saying the building's on fire, you got to get out. The tiger's in the jungle, you better run, right? When it's stimulated by stress, though, those signals going back and forth, the burning building and running from the tiger is usually imagined. However, our body doesn't know that. All it knows is there's physical signs of stress and therefore it needs to get to work. And what I mean by that is the adrenals get increased, cortisol levels get increased, anything to help us get quick energy so we can get ourselves out because it's a survival mechanism. What happens? And things such as our digestive system, the body automatically slows it down because you don't need to eat when the building's on fire, right? As a matter of fact, your body would prefer if you don't think about food at all because you're out there trying to save your life. And so hence that's exactly what happens when we're highly stressed is we often don't even think about food. We find ourselves not hungry. And if we do eat, we may get stomach gas and gastrointestinal problems and find it very hard to digest our food. In addition to that, often that is also what's common, that nausea comes with stress because the juices and the digestive system just aren't working like they normally would. And this can cause stomach problems. And this is one of the most common stress-related intestinal problems and gastrointestinal problems and stomach problems are one of the most common physical signs of stress. Because once again, remember, this is over time. This is something that is lingering, reoccurring, or consistent, which also then can bring on insomnia. And insomnia, when we're stressed, can happen in two ways. One, we have difficulties actually going to sleep. So you go to bed around 11 and you're thinking, great, I can, get some good sleep tonight. And then your brain starts turning. And then before you know it, you find yourself and it's like 1 o'clock in the morning and you still haven't gone to sleep. And you've just been kind of lying there looking at the ceiling. Meanwhile, your brain's been churning. So that keeps you awake. The other type of insomnia is what's called the anxiety wake up, which literally happens between about 3:30 and 5 in the morning. Because what happens during that time is that our adrenals are starting to kind of rev up for the day and they're amping up. And in there, if we have a REM cycle and we're just slightly starting to wake up and then the adrenals are getting pumped up, and if these two meet, then we kind of wake up. And then our brains automatically start spinning about what we need to do during the day, what we should be doing during the day, how our days are different, or what happened yesterday. And then that just continues, then that keeps you up. And you end up probably, oftentimes will get up extra early, but then feel tired throughout the day. Random body aches and muscle tensions are also common for obvious reasons. We're more in a protective position. We may be holding our body kind of in an enclosed way, or simply because we haven't had time to exercise because we're so stressed out and we have so many things to do, or we're so low energy and feel so sluggish that then our body just has random aches and pains. Now, the emotional signs of stress, once again, these emotional signs are uncharacteristic of who you are or normally are. Agitation, which means if you're uncharacteristically anxious or agitated or feeling moody, that can be an emotional sign of stress. Hopelessness. Now, this is an experience of that dread that you might wake up with in the morning. and just have the sense of like hopelessness just overcoming you, or it's like an overwhelming wave of dread, feeling hopeless, kind of feeling like it'll never work, that is a sign of hopelessness due to stress. Similarly, with withdrawal, you'll find yourself now, if you're normally kind of an isolative person or an introvert and normally don't interact with people, then that's not necessarily a sign of stress. When you withdraw and it's a sign of stress, it would be that would look something like if you typically wave to your neighbors and then you find yourself just not wanting to wave with them, just not wanting to interact with them. As a matter of fact, you make sure that you, for example, go get your mail when you know they're not around, because the thought of bumping into them or anybody for that matter is just unbearable. And you find yourself wanting to stay in your house or avoiding people, and maybe even avoiding Zoom calls or phone calls. That is the type of withdrawal I'm talking to that is related to stress. Personality changes, sudden or gradual. So things, what that kind of looks like in these times with the pandemic is it's the change. So for example, contamination is a big deal right now, obviously, right? And also there's a sense of feeling out of control. And so when we feel out of control, we look around our environment to find things that we can control. So for example, you might find yourself wiping the counters one more, two more times than normal, or making sure that the house is cleaner and things are just kind of exactly right, because it gives you a sense of control, which then gives you a sense of comfort. Those are the types of changes I'm talking about that would be an emotional sign of stress. Also, self-neglect. I mean, it's one thing, especially during these times, to perhaps not take a shower before you turn on your Zoom call for work because you were really busy or you didn't sleep well the night before. But it's another then to find yourself not taking showers for several days, not interested or forgetting to brush your teeth, finding that you're just not hungry, so you're not eating meals. Those would be all of an example of self-neglect due to stress. So when these signs occur, and once again, when they're reoccurring, consistent, or lingering, then these patterns start playing out. And typically, that's first experienced with a sense of overwhelm. So if you have continual stress, you start feeling very overwhelmed. And when that overwhelm happens, and the overwhelm can be internal or external. So overwhelmed just naturally because of what's going on these days with the pandemic and politically and everything, that's circumstantial. And it can bring on a lot of overwhelm, and it's like a feeling of a wave. Internal overwhelm is thinking about, oh my gosh, you know, I've got to interview for this job and I've got to look and I've got 3 days and I don't have anything to wear and what am I going to do? And it just also feels like a wave. Or, you know, I have so many things to do today and things are so different and I can't work like I used to and it's more complicated and I just don't know what to do. So that would be an example. There's an internal dialogue that is very overwhelming and saying that things are very overwhelming. When the overwhelm kicks in because of stress, and it then starts triggering the mind to ruminate. Now, ruminate literally is what a cow does, okay, when it chews grass. And what it does is it chews it, puts it through one stomach, brings it back up, chews it, puts it through another stomach. And they do this 4 times. Well, what this looks like in humans is that you think a thought and then you spin it around a while and then you think it again and you spin and you think and you think and you spin and you get this experience that you're actually thinking that you're solving a problem or you have somewhere to go, but actually you're like that hamster in the wheel that just keeps spinning and spinning and spinning and you don't go anywhere. That's the danger of ruminating, is that it has the illusion, it gives the illusion that we're solving a problem. And that if we think hard about it long enough, turn it around so many different ways, that we will then come up with a solution. The problem with that is that ruminating, the thoughts that pop up in your head that you ruminate on are typically emotionally charged. And so when they're emotionally charged thoughts and you start spinning them, basically what happens is you keep triggering the emotion, and the emotion actually gets bigger or more intense or stays around and lingers longer, even though the very thing we're probably doing is to try and solve the problem to feel better. Ruminating actually causes us to feel worse. And from ruminating, then there are a couple of thinking styles that happen that keep the ruminating going. And one of them is a global thinker, or the big picture, that you have the inability, you find yourself kind of, you find yourself looking at things in like a big way of like, oh my gosh, there's so many things to do and I don't know where to begin. Or there's so many, posts about the political system, and everyone's talking about all these bad things, and it's like you're standing over it and just seeing the big picture and not being able to specifically hone in on anything. And when you stand and look at the big picture of something, when there's a lot of moving parts, that can be very overwhelming because it disables you from figuring out a plan, from breaking it down into small steps, right? And that's exactly what ruminate wants us to do, is do useless worry instead of useful examination and analysis. And the difference between useless worry and useful examination and analysis is that examining and analyzing leads to a plan. Ruminating does not. It just keeps it spinning. And then you get other thought processes like catastrophic and magnification. Catastrophizing is like the what ifs. Well, what if my groceries don't come today? And then what if tomorrow they run out of eggs? And then my groceries come and I don't have eggs. And I wanted to bake this cake this weekend. And what if I can't bake the cake this weekend for my child's birthday? Then my child's going to be so upset, and then I'll feel so sad, and then we'll have a miserable weekend. And if we have a miserable weekend, then I'll go on Monday to my Zoom call and I'll just feel awful. And if I feel awful, I'll snap at somebody. And if I snap at somebody, I'll lose my job, right? You go from, now we were just talking about what if the groceries don't get delivered, to suddenly now I've lost my job. That is catastrophic thinking. Magnification is similar, where it just blows things out of proportion, right? And things get very big and huge and, feel overwhelming. Now, with the ruminating that's triggered by overwhelm, that then triggers these thinking styles, those thinking styles are spinning, 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 and they suck you in to what I would call internal isolation, which means that you may be functioning, you might be talking to somebody, you might even be laughing and look like you're engaged with someone, but actually you're not. At least you're not emotionally engaged in the situation, because all your emotions are getting sucked up in the back here with a thought that's niggling at your brain and going, red alert, or you better think about that. You've got so many things to do. You shouldn't be just sitting here. You got to move. Come on. And that is really filling up your brain space to the point where you are just focused in a kind of a self-absorbed way internally. And like I said, while you may be interacting externally, you may not even remember that you had a conversation with someone. You might find yourself forgetting a lot of things because you weren't really listening, because you were busy. All that energy and your thinking power was getting sucked in to your brain, and you were listening to these thoughts that you're churning over and over again. Now, when this process happens, how it then manifests externally is you find yourself more irritable. You'll find things that normally aren't irritable. People that you normally don't bug you are saying things, and truly just annoying. You might find yourself going from 0 to 60 very quickly. Those are all signs and external manifestations of the pattern of stress. And then the other one is insomnia, which I explained earlier about the 2 types of insomnia that can happen when you're stressed out. So if those 2 things are going on, because typically, oftentimes that's how we notice it first. Because if you have a pattern of ruminating, it's hard to recognize it at first. But noticing if you're extremely irritable or you've been having sleep problems, then that can lead you to identify more patterns of stress. So the remedy is an emotional well-being and mental health practice, which I'm going to give you some thoughts and ideas about what that is today. Now, I think the most important word in this statement, emotional well-being and mental health, is the word practice, because truly that's what it needs to be. It needs to be things that you do on a day-to-day basis that restore you and provide rejuvenation and self-care. Now, some of the blocks to this kind of practice, and it's helpful to possibly ask yourself this question now and think about it, or write some notes in your phone or journal about it later, is what was modeled in your family as far as self-care? Was self-care thought of as selfish? Was it self-indulgent? Was it something that your family provided time for and actually talked about? It's invaluable to know exactly what was the view of self-care in the family that you grew up in, because that influences then your view about self-care. With an emotional well-being and mental health practice, it's very important and valuable to take small steps. So breaking things down into small steps can be very important. So for example, if you're thinking you want to pick up a meditation practice, don't start with a solid 30 minutes every day. Start with 5 or 10 and work up to that 30 minutes. The same sort of thing if you want to take on some new exercise program or yoga or something, doing it in small steps, taking small bites and keeping it continual. So the small steps help things continual rather than an on-off practice. So rather than for 3 days meditating for like a whole 45 minutes and then just stopping it because you're tired of it, or you don't have time to do the 45 minutes. If you don't have time to do the 45 minutes and you can't do it at all, and then you've just turned the switch off for a few days, and then now you have some time, and so now you can do it. That erraticness of a self-care plan isn't helpful or useful. You want it continual. So hence the reason why those taking it in small steps can help keep it continual. And knowing that you can always reset. If you do go sideways with your self-care plan or your emotional well-being and mental health practice, then you can reset and say, okay, I've been off of it for the last couple of days, and this evening I'm definitely going to meditate for 10 minutes, right? So resetting it is fine. And being more present, so having it more individualized in some ways and being more present and check in at the present time. So for example, in the middle of the day, you might ask yourself, do I feel rested today? And gosh, I haven't slept in the last couple of nights. So tonight, I'm ending work at a reasonable time. I can go home and have some dinner, relax for a few, and then make sure I'm in bed by 10 or 10:30 to hopefully catch up on that sleep that I've missed. That is much better way of looking at self-care and your mental health practice, instead of thinking, okay, this year I'm going to go to bed every night by 10:30, right? And then you do that for about 5 days and then you never return to it. That's not as helpful. And anything you do for self-care, or most things that you do for self-care, for example, taking a shower and brushing your teeth are all self-care. Well, what I'm talking about is the experience, for example, of getting into a really good book and reading it for an hour or two and just getting lost in it, doing a hobby, taking a walk. All these things supply some sense of restoration or rejuvenation, that you actually feel like you have removed yourself from whatever you're spinning on or the situation that you've been churning in your head, and that you go off for a walk and you're not thinking about it. You get space from it. So that way, when you come back, you have more freedom to kind of look at the different angles of the situation rather than just thinking one way and getting connected to that situation. You want to create some space between you and the stressful situations, or you and the day. And this all helps you then move towards connection to other people, the ability to step outside of yourself or look outside of yourself rather than to just look inward. And then you experience some joy along the way. So here's some tips on self-care. I'm going to take a moment to note that self-care is different than self-medication. And I'm sure you've all heard, on the radio or a podcast or whatever you listen to, whatever your news source is streaming, that the sales of alcohol have gone up this year. And that's true because maybe some people are just like, oh, good, now I finally have time to drink that wine and explore some of the wines I've wanted for a long time. I'm sure there's truth to that. Some people do have a fair amount of time on their hands. The other thing is that oftentimes we think that self-medication is self-care, and it's actually not. So self-care is a healthy pattern to do things that break the patterns of emotional or mental stress, right? So it's a healthy pattern to do things that either take care of yourself or others or help you engage in something that gives you the sense that you've actually taken a break. Okay. And then that stops the rumination for a while. It stops the forgetting. It stops the internal isolation. Okay. Self-medication is a reward for all the stress that you're going through that is unhealthy. So self-medication is kind of like, okay, when I finish this project that I've been working on, I can go have a cigarette, right? Or, I'm so exhausted at the end of my day that I just have to have an edible, because I really deserve that because I've been encountering all this stress and I deserve to have a glass of wine or a beer or an edible or a cigarette, right? And those are just a few of the options we have. But the idea with this, sadly, is that it's like you have to white knuckle it through the day, or you have to just tolerate the stress. And finally, after you've powered through it, you can have a reward. And that's self-medication, which eventually will work against you. So once in a while, you want to check in, especially during these times in this pandemic. Have I engaged in any patterns that are self-destructive, unhealthy, or addictive? Or have I engaged in activities that create time or space that restore or rejuvenate me? So I want to take a moment and speak about acceptance, because in order to do what I'm about to propose as far as some methods and tools to combat overwhelm and rumination and some of the thinking styles, is there needs to be acceptance. There needs to be, well, it's more effective if there is an acceptance of, for example, oh, there I go, I'm spinning again. Okay, so now I need to, do my routine and do my inner dialogue so that the spinning will stop. That's an example of the acceptance I'm talking about. Acceptance doesn't mean that you are surrendering to unhealthy stress. And a lot of times people get worried or concerned or fearful of accepting, because then they think that that's making a statement that they're surrendering to whatever is wrong. It doesn't mean that you won't put something into action. It just means you're accepting what's in front of you so that you can put something into action, because you're hitting the pause button. You're going to look at it a little more closely and be able then to produce something that's helpful. It does mean acknowledging what's happened, and I think I've given you a couple examples of that for now. It prevents meta emotion. Now, what meta emotion is the emotions that you have about emotions. So, for example, probably many of you here, I know myself included, how many of you felt angry at yourself for being angry, right? It's a cycle. So you're having a reaction of anger because you're angry at the fact that you're feeling angry. And that's a pretty common one. That's the meta emotion. It's your feelings and philosophies about feelings. So what are your feelings and thoughts about sadness, anger, hatred? And I'm sure you could go on and on with some ideas. But by accepting things, that prevents the emet of emotion. Because if you accept your overwhelm or you accept you're angry, then you're not going to be angry about being angry or overwhelmed about being overwhelmed. Acceptance also in this context does mean that you can put a remedy into action. So acceptance kind of loosens things up in a way that actually you can move forward once you've accepted something, because then it enables you to think it through more clearly, get a better understanding, and then usually apply a remedy to it more quickly and a remedy that is more effective. So I just invite you to keep in mind that acceptance really does help, because it means you acknowledge what's happening, that it alleviates meta emotions, and that it means that you can, it enables you as part of the process to help you put things into action. So earlier in the beginning, I said, I'm going to take you through a 4-part process that will help you manage your stress. And so the first thing is to calm down. And how do you do that? Well, if you're feeling overwhelmed, press the stop button, which means you tell yourself, okay, I'm hitting the pause button here. I'm hitting the stop button. I need to stop. And then you take breaths. And I have up here, the numbers are reversed actually, but you do a 3-4 breath. And what a 3-4 breath is where you breathe into the count of 3, but you exhale to the count of 4. Count of 3, count of 4. Because the count of 4 will automatically, because you're really exhaling and taking that deep breath, will send messages to the brain that it's okay. It's time to stop. The longer exhale, that's why people sigh sometimes. The longer exhale, it enables you to give the body time to adjust and send messages to the brain that everything's okay. Excuse me. So after you've taken the breaths, you observe. And what do you observe? You can do like a mindfulness narrative, and you observe your thoughts and your feelings, and then go external and you observe your environment and the situations. And then you decide, because you've hit the pause button, you've taken the deep breaths, you observe the situation, and then you can decide how to proceed based on why you were interested in this situation and based on what you've observed. So now you can slow down. Once you calm down a little bit and use the stop technique, which is stop, take a breath, observe, and proceed. Slowing down, what I'm talking about here is to slow down the ruminating. So here's a few things. A mindfulness narrative, which can look like, okay, I'm sitting here and I notice that my brain is spinning on thoughts about if I'm going to be able to get a vaccine soon. And I'm very worried about that. And my hands are crossed and my legs are crossed. And I'm noticing that it's kind of cold in this room. That's a mindfulness narrative. It's describing your situation that you're currently in a way that is non-judgmental. Another thing you can do for ruminating is worry time. And what worry time is that when I work with people on this one, I say, okay, pull out your phone and set a time every day. Probably 30 days is good. Set a time every day, maybe 5 to 5:30. That's going to give you an alarm and enables you then, that is your worry time. Schedule it in. So from 5 to 5:30 every day, you're going to sit down and either type out or write out all the things that you're worried about. Sit there and worry about them as much as you want. And then when 5:30 comes around, you stop. You just stop. And if any worries come up after the worry time or before worry time, you can let yourself know. And this is like your little mantra that, you know what, this is not my worry time. This is problem solving time. Or this is sleep time. Or whatever time it is, but it's not worry time. I worry between 5 and 5:30 every day. So let me take all of this and put it in the to-do box for 5 to 5:30. Now, another way you could put it in the to-do box is, if you want, you can write things down that you want to worry about. So when 5 o'clock rolls around, you have a list and you just can go through the list and just start worrying about everything. And then the last one is to just do anything you can to shift your focus from internal to external, right? And so focusing on the room, focusing what's in front of you, focusing on what the things are around you, that is what can help. So you're shifting your useless worry to a useful examination or analysis. So reassurance. My apologies, I'm making you tired here. Reassurance. Now, reassurance is something that you do with those thinking styles. You want to shift those thinking styles and have an internal narrative that allows you to reassure yourself that you've got this, or that it's okay and nothing's going to fall apart. And so you're battling global and catastrophic and magnification, or all or nothing thinking styles. And so one remedy is to get specific, especially for global or catastrophic thinking, and even maybe magnification, where you go, okay, I am so overwhelmed today. I don't know how I'm going to get through the day. It's going to be a long day. Getting specific would be, okay, first things first, what do I need to do in the next 5 minutes, right? And then you do it. What do I need to do in the 5 minutes after that? And you break things down into small bites or small tasks. Because when you get specific, then you can solve the problem, and it takes you out of that worry and that overwhelm. Examining evidence is a pretty classic one that when you hear yourself saying a lot of, I feel that somebody's watching me, or I feel that my cat needs to go out. That's actually not a feeling that your cat needs to go out. That's a fact. And so sometimes the feelings and the facts get all mushed together, and then you're unable to discern what is the evidence saying. And so examining evidence, which means you look outside yourself and you literally, think, okay, so what's the evidence that my cat's tired, right? Well, they're closing their eyes and they are curling up, and now they've just closed their eyes. Again, they opened them and closed them. That gives you a sign that obviously your cat is tired. And that would be an example of examining the evidence. Facts are not feelings, and feelings are not facts. Did I say that right? Yes. Facts are not feelings, and feelings are not facts. They both exist in the same space at the same time, and sometimes about the same thing, but they are two different things. So you have your feelings and you have your facts. So I feel a bit distracted because my cat's not sleeping. That would be appropriate. The I feel needs to be attached to an actual feeling. And so often we'll attach it to the facts and then think, just because I feel it, therefore it must be true. Shades of gray is a classic one to break up all or nothing thinking, or thinking that's going from 0 to 10 quite rapidly. And all you need to do is focus on shifting your language. So shades of gray, all or nothing thinking is all or nothing, always, never. Shades of gray is perhaps, maybe, sometimes, I will. It's all those words in between that fit in the 1 through 9. So if you practice that on a daily basis, guess what? You internalize it, and then it's no longer a practice anymore. It just comes naturally. And then the ABC method is where, if you have an interest of a hobby, so for example, cycling, and then you think, okay, I'm going to go through the alphabet and see if I can find something that begins with an A that is related to cycling, and then something that begins with a B, and that's related to cycling. And you go through the alphabet. I actually personally have never made it through the alphabet because I usually am refocused on another topic, or I just left it sitting there and never really picked it up. So connect. So this is the last one. And what connection does, what I mean by connection is to connect in a way. So connect with others, connect with things outside of yourself to stop the internal isolation. You can use this internal isolation as a barometer, as a sign that tells you, oh gosh, I've got to somehow figure out how to actually talk to somebody else and connect with another human being, because that's not at all what I'm doing. You want to be able to engage in self-care, so to do other things quickly and in a timely manner and kind of in a pattern that can help alleviate the internal isolation. Another way to go external, which is the big thing you want to do, is when you take a walk, for example, for your self-care, challenge yourself to think, okay, I've walked down this path numerous times, but I'm going to look for 100 things. Not 100 things, 10 things. I'm going to look for 10 things that will allow that I've never seen before on this walk. So you can walk down a familiar space and you think, all right, you know, what are 10 things that I've never seen before? And you just start looking for things you haven't seen before. It's a very powerful exercise, and even more powerful if you challenge yourself to look for 100 things you've never seen before. 10 is probably preferable. And it pulls you outside of yourself in a way that you're actually looking for specific things, right? And it gets you outside and gets all that stuff in the back of your brain to slow down and stop. So here's a couple of ideas and one exercise here to help you with that. And then another way to go external and help with it is to talk to somebody and just say, hey, you know, can I just download something for right now? And go. It's always good to have a few friends that you can do that with, the downloading, because sometimes you feel great afterwards and that's all you needed. Now, irritability, take a walk. Reach out and talk to somebody. Reach out and say, you know what, I just need to vent. Can you listen for 15 minutes? That's all I need you to do, is just listen. You don't need to solve my problem. You don't need to do anything. Just listen. That can help. Or to reach out and talk to somebody about how you feel irritable and to bounce ideas off of them. That's another type of reaching out. And then reset. So resetting could look like taking a walk and reaching out. And then before you go back in the office, you take a few deep breaths to reset and compartmentalize the experience that got you irritable so that you can then do something and dial down the irritability. Insomnia. So there's a couple of ways to deal with insomnia. Then a couple of methods that I believe are pretty helpful. And one of them is sleep time. And what sleep time simply is that about a half an hour before you're ready to go to sleep, you use sleep time kind of like your mantra, and you go through your sleep routine, whatever that might be, but make sure you have one. And if thoughts pop up, you can always say, well, you know what, I'll save that for tomorrow because right now it's sleep time. Or this isn't worry time right now, this is sleep time. And be able to practice placing certain thoughts in different areas, or moving them aside, or allowing yourself not to believe them. We don't need to believe everything that we think. So comfortable is if you do the sleep time and you block off time, you know, a half hour before, and you go through your ritual and you remind yourself that's your sleep ritual, and you remind yourself that it's time to go to sleep. And you're in bed, and then you can sit and shift your focus and think, okay, so what are the things that are comfortable right now? Oh, I really like the feel of my pajamas against my skin. I really like the sheets against my skin. It feels so comfortable to breathe deeply. And so you're just focusing on the things are comfort, because this exercise works very well with the thought that what you focus on is what you amplify. So if you focus on feeling uncomfortable and staying awake all night, guess what? The more you're more than likely to stay awake all night, right? If you focus on what's comfortable and how to get comfortable and breathe deeply and think soon I'm going to be asleep, guess what? More than likely soon you will be asleep. Then deep breathing exercises are always good for when you need to go to sleep. They really are. They're probably, in my opinion, the best time to use them. And then try and experiment with Calm apps. And there's Calms is the big one out there right now, but there's Headspace and there's a variety of others that are specially designed, and a lot of them have sleep meditations, and you can listen to those. And if you happen to be someone who wakes up at like 3:34 in the morning, then just make sure before you go to bed that you have your phone ready with AirPods or earbuds or something, so that all you need to do is put the earbuds in quickly, hit the button, and the Calm app or whatever app you want is pretty much ready to go. And you can do it, and then you just work on going back to sleep. So, do you got unhealthy stress? Well, if you do, then remember calming down, breathing, the stop method to slow down the overwhelm, and then slow down. And slow down, the purpose of the slow down is to slow down the spinning and the rumination and maybe just the general kind of anxiety that's getting amped up, right? Doing mindfulness methods, doing the ABCs, getting outside of yourself, shifting the focus, reassuring, shifting your internal narrative from global, catastrophic, magnification, all or nothing, to a more accurate and true perception of what's going on, and a sense that, you know what, I can get through this. I've got this. I'm going to break this down in small parts so that I can get these tasks done in a timely manner. That's an example of reassurance. And then also then with that external focus, connect in any way you can with other people, whether it's just a smile at someone who is 6 feet apart, even though they can't see your smile in the mask. If it's a Zoom connection, or you want to FaceTime somebody just to download something, that's really okay. That's another thing that just draws us out. You're looking for things that will help you shift your focus to outside of yourself and not get sucked into that internal isolation, which then leads to manifest irritability and insomnia. All right. So I want to thank you for your time. Once again, this is who I am, Elizabeth Dondinell. I'm a licensed marriage family therapist, the founder of the East Bay Center for Anxiety Relief. I have enjoyed spending time with you this evening and giving you this webinar. And I do hope that you found it a good use of your time. And here's my contact information. If you have any questions, thoughts, or perhaps you'd like to seek us out for further support, if you're struggling with depression or anxiety, or want more tools and methods to handle your stress. We also work with couples and families and kids and teens in various aspects. So if anything you think we might be able to support you, please reach out and contact us, call or email or check our website. Thanks a lot. Take good care.